So you're thinking about buying a new raft. You're doing some research on the Water Master Bruin. 6 months ago, I was in the same spot you were. I was looking at Flycraft, I was looking at Outcast, I was looking at Catch-A-Craft, and I was looking at Water Master. So let's talk about pros. It is a smaller and lighter boat. I have a Toyota Sienna, and I can put the frame down the middle, and I can put the boat in the car, and I can put more than a week's worth of gear into the car as well, and still have the middle seats up. Now, if you take the middle seats out, you can get even more stuff in. So I love the minivan. It's not sexy, but it's definitely utilitarian. Various configurations, and I already talked about this, and I'll show some shots of some of the different configurations. So when we got the boat, one of the first trips that we took it out, we took the whole family down the Yakima River. Instead of putting in the angler front seat, I got the bench seat and I put that in. So 2 kids could sit in front, 1 adult was in back, adult was rowing in the middle. I think with the bench seat, you could definitely put 2 adults in front, as long as they were comfortable being in tight quarters. You could put 4 adults in that boat. You know, maybe you wouldn't have a ton of room for gear for like overnights and stuff like that, but if you're doing a day trip and you've got people that don't mind sitting next to each other all day long in the boat, it's a great boat to do that, the bench seat. When I am out fishing, it has a front seat, which is on a swiveling seat, so you can sort of put your feet up on the tubes and you can swivel sideways, you can swivel all the way around to 360 degrees, and I have a third seat in back which also swivels 360 degrees. Now, with the back seat, you do have to watch out for the anchor. If you have the anchor system, which I highly recommend you get, you do have to sort of move all the pieces around a little bit. That back seat can rotate 360 degrees if you install it all correctly. It's not going to be perfectly lined up in the middle. That person in the back will probably be off to one side and your anchor is probably going to be situated a little bit on the other side. It's definitely possible and easy to do. One of the things that I liked about this boat was that it was class 4 rated. I know I'm not doing class 4 most of the time. It's always better to have more boat than less boat. I'd rather be never need that class 3 plus ability, but I'd rather have it than to kind of want it to be like a class 2 or class 3 boat, and you know, the class 3 is sort of pushing it. It is a very stable boat. I'll show some shots where I am walking around the frame trying to unhook a fish. I have stood up on the frame in the back, you know, while it's floating down a river. Not necessarily recommended. It's super stable and I've never felt like it was going to flip over. One of the pros is its weight limit. It can carry 1,500 pounds. Now, I can't really imagine putting 1,500 pounds in it, but the capacity is there. You know, let's say you are a hunter and you're floating down and you bag a elk and you put it in. An elk could be 500 pounds. So the boat can definitely handle that stuff, and having that extra weight limit was definitely a pro for me. One of the pros, the NRS frame. There may be some debate about custom frames being stronger or better, but NRS is well proven. Whitewater rafting community uses it with no problems. There's lots of accessories, there's lots of dealers. It is going to be less expensive probably than a custom frame. The Water Master Bruin has a self-bending floor, which in my mind is pretty essential, but there are different styles of rafts out there. Some are called bucket boats, which if water goes in, it stays in until you pull over and pump it out. Or you have a self-bailing floor, which when water comes in, it gets sucked out the bottom. This does mean that the floor doesn't stay dry, but if you're getting in and out of a boat, it's never gonna stay dry. So it's just something you always got to pack your stuff in waterproof bags. We have a like mesh frame that straps into the back and it sort of suspends off the floor so you can put gear in and it's not going to sit necessarily wet. I highly recommend anything that can't get wet should be in waterproof bags. Everything is adjustable on this, so depending upon your length of legs and arms or whatever, you can put the seat or the feet rests, you can adjust those, you can adjust the oar locks where they are, how far away from you, or how high they sit or how low they sit. Because it's a NRS frame and because everything is customizable and movable, that's definitely an advantage for people of all different sizes. It's American made. The fabrics are sent in from overseas, but the whole thing is assembled in Montana, which is awesome, and it's great to support American companies. And the bag system, at first I didn't really like it, but I have learned to appreciate it, and I think it's great, especially at the end of the day. It's basically a big cross that you roll the boat up into, and then when you close it, there's folds, the cross, sort of the points in the cross, fold over the boat, and then you strap it down. And at first I was like, well, I don't know, this seems kind of weird, and like, why not just have a bag? But if you've ever had an inflatable boat that you close at the end of the day, you know that when you put it away at home, it goes in really easy. But when you're at the end of the day and things are wet and it's cold and it's dark, that boat never fits in the bag the same way it does when you're at home. And so having this bag that folds over on it is actually great, because let's say you don't get all the air out of it. You can still roll it up. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than normal, but those folds still fold over it and you can still strap it and close it, and it's a relatively small package. The other thing is that all the pieces tend to be light enough that I can carry. I can carry the boat kind of on the back, on my back. I wish it was a little bit better. I wish the straps were situated just a little bit different so it fit more like a backpack. But with a little bit of finagling, I can carry it like a backpack. The frame with one of the front seats on, I can definitely carry that by myself. If I had to carry it for a long way, I would probably take both seats, both front and rear seat off, and carry it that way. It's definitely light enough to do that. The other thing that's kind of cool is that you can fold in both the front thigh bar and the back utility bar, which holds the anchor, and it makes the frame smaller. And you can leave the oar locks on and you can loosen those and then rotate those in. So it actually becomes a pretty small package. I can fit it down the middle of my minivan, in between the seats if I have them in there. That's a pretty cool thing. I've had experience rowing everything from Water Master Grizzlies up to fiberglass Clacka crafts and adipose and drift boats and that kind of size. And I think the Bruin sits closer to pontoon boats, to single pontoon boats, because it's a very responsive raft. It is very easy to row. You take your stroke and the boat is very responsive. If you've ever rowed a drift boat, you know that like that first stroke and a half or 2 strokes, the boat is more slowing down than it is actually, being responsive. So it's a great boat for someone to learn on. I would say if you haven't rowed a lot, when we upgraded to the carbon fiber Sawyer oars,
so cool,
they do not have oar rights, which basically keep the oar from feathering in the oar lock. That can be something that can be tricky for someone that might be used to like a pontoon boat that uses pins to keep the oars perpendicular to the water. If you upgrade the oars, that may be something new, and I certainly would recommend taking the boat out on a lake before you take it out on a river so that you can kind of get used to that. The upgraded oars do have little biscuits that you can kind of like move around so that you can adjust how far the oars slide back and forth. But I did find that after a day of rowing, they would sort of move around a little bit, and I did have to like adjust them, which they were pretty easy to do. Blowing up the raft is fairly straightforward, though I have to be honest, I have not blown the whole raft up by hand very many times. I do have a portable battery-powered pump that I use, and I'll do a whole nother video if you want me to about my favorite accessories that I use. But I got this off Amazon. It's battery-powered. You can control what PSI you want, so it makes blowing the raft up super easy, and I just remember to charge it the night before, and I can probably blow up the raft 4 times on one battery. So it's great for a trip where you may have to deflate it and inflate it a couple times. So if you want to see my favorite accessories or go into more detail about that, let me know in the comments below. One of the last advantages of the Bruin is how small it breaks down. So for the most part, I keep the frame all put together. But if I wanted to take a horse packing trip, or I wanted to fly to Alaska or go down to Chile, you can take apart the frame into just single bars, and then the longer bars separate and you can pack those up. So I'd love to do a trip where I get horse packed into the Bob Marshall and float down the South Fork of the Flathead for a week. But there's some limitations on like how much a horse can carry. And so being able to break down the whole frame into really small chunks means that this is possible. If I have a custom frame that only breaks into 2 halves, that might be too heavy for the horse, or might be too cumbersome to fit through a door or something like that. So the fact that the Bruin really can break down into a lot of different small pieces means it's a great craft if you are going to do any sort of adventure that involves flying or horse packing or packing it in or something like that. With everything, there's pros and there's cons. There's going to be trade-offs. One of the downsides to having a self-bailing floor is that it's not going to be dry. You are going to have water that's going to splash up. The floor is going to be wet. So you always have to make sure that any gear that can't get wet is in a good dry bag. The floor is basically think of it like a stand-up paddleboard. The floor is drop stitched into the bottom, so it is removable. You blow it up just like a stand-up paddleboard. If you are a heavy person and you stand up in the very front or in the very back, the floor will push down into the water and water will come up. If you think about a stand-up paddleboard, where do you stand? You stand in the middle. That's where you stand. If you walk out to the very end, the end is going to get pushed down. That's just the way it works. Water Master fixed this by installing D-rings that go around the inside of the raft. And then on the floor, there are D-rings. So you take little 3-foot cinch straps and you help hold that floor up. So it helps keeps the floor from sinking. This boat was made initially for 2 people. So if you get 3 guys in there that are heavy, the floor is going to be wet. To some people that may be a downside, but you just need to keep that in mind. One of the other downsides is that there's not a rod rack with it. So NRS does make some fishing holders that you could put something like Ram or Scotty mounts on. So you could do individual holders like that, but there are no rod tubes. There are some companies that make rod tubes that might work on it, but they don't fit longer rods. That they don't account for like trout spay, like 11.6, or micro spay rods of 11 foot 6 inches or 11 foot Euro nymphing rods. That's a problem. For now, I haven't really figured out what I'm going to do. I usually just put both rods up with one of the people when we're floating, or have one sticking out the back. I will probably get some Scotty mounts for that. That's probably how I'll handle it. Water Master, make a rod rack that fits trout spay rods. I can't really imagine, with the boat being 11.5 feet, it's gonna fit spay rods, 14 foot, 13.6s or whatever. I don't see that happening with a small boat. Hopefully trout spay, Euro nymphing rods, we can get a fishing rod holder for that. So one of the things about the NRS fishing frame and the boat and the short size, especially if you have 3 people in the boat. If you have only 2 people, you can slide everything back a little bit. When you have 3 people in the boat, you kind of are running out of room a little bit, and so you have to sort of center the rowing seat and then push the front seat forward as much as you can. And so when you sit up that high, your feet don't actually touch the bottom of the boat. You rest your feet on the tubes of the boat. And so you're sitting up high, which means that you feel, if you hit something, that you feel like you might pitch forward out of the boat. And so I definitely recommend getting the thigh bar for the front seat, because we use that as a handhold. So when we went down the Grand Ronde River, we hit rocks. It was definitely comforting having something that you felt solid that you could sort of hold on to. We never got thrown out of the boat, but there was definitely times where you're like, oh, we're about to hit this rock, and you grab onto it and sort of brace yourself. That front seat, you definitely feel a little bit forward, which is actually also a good thing when you're fishing. You don't feel like the boat is in your way, and you're sort of don't have the front of the raft in the way of like getting your line and all this kind of stuff in the way. So it's both a pro and a con. I highly recommend this raft. I have enjoyed it very much. We've done all sorts of things. We've done family trips in it with 4 people. We've done fishing trips. I've done a 4-day trip down the Grand Ronde with my wife, and we camped for 3 nights and 4 days. The raft is super easy to row. I love the anchor system. Coming from a single Water Master Grizzly, like I had an anchor system on that, and I don't really recommend people to anchor off small boats in rivers. And so having a real anchor system was super cool. So in conclusion, I think the people that are going to be interested in it are the people that may want to do some traveling with it, that may want to have flexible configurations, have a family, have small kids, have dogs and stuff that they want to take with it. I think the bench seats and the different kind of seat configurations make it really flexible for a lot of different situations. If people are looking for a skinny water boat, the Bruin is awesome for that. If people, maybe you live in an apartment and you don't have room for a drift boat or a bigger boat, I actually keep our boat stored in storage, which is just down the road from us, but I don't keep it in the house. After a trip, I will clean it out, dry it, deflate it, and then I'll take it over storage. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you very much.